By late 1962, the Beatles were feeling frustrated and disheartened. Despite their relentless efforts over the previous 3 years to attain nationwide recognition, their success remained largely confined to Liverpool and Hamburg. John expressed they felt stale and cramped. They were eager to leave Liverpool and explore new opportunities. Their frequent performances at the Cavern Club in Liverpool had lost their excitement. While they had a strong local following, their popularity hadn't expanded beyond their hometown. They did perform in other cities, like Peterborough, where they opened for Frank Ifield. But aside from their 5 stints in Hamburg, Germany, they often struggled to make an impact outside Liverpool. John also believed they had outgrown the Hamburg scene, but they returned there in late 1962 due to existing commitments. At this point, it seemed like the Beatles were destined to remain a Liverpool-based phenomenon. However, a series of lucky events and an expertly crafted song would soon change their trajectory and alter the course of history. Little did they realize that the track they recorded on November 26, 1962, intended as their second single, would be the catalyst to propel them beyond Liverpool and onto the world stage. That song was Please Please Me, which finally unlocked the doors they had been knocking on for years. The first stroke of luck occurred when Brian, encouraged by George Martin, approached music publisher Dick James to secure a deal for the new Lennon-McCartney compositions. Brian had been dissatisfied with Beachwood Music for its lackluster promotion for Love Me Do. To finalize the publishing agreement, Dick James played Please Please Me over the phone for Philip Jones, the producer of the national television show Thank Your Lucky Stars. Jones agreed to feature the Beatles on one of his upcoming shows, which secured the publishing deal for Dick James. The new single was released in the UK on January 11, 1963. At the time, Britain was experiencing one of its harshest winters, and on January 19, 1963, with many snowed in, viewers across the country tuned in to watch the Beatles perform Please Please Me on Thank Your Lucky Stars. The band's energetic performance, along with their distinctive appearance and unique hairstyles, grabbed the nation's attention, propelling the song up the charts. As their popularity grew, they were booked for back-to-back national tours by promoter Arthur Howes, which, along with the press coverage and growing success of the single, pushed Please Please Me to number 1 on most British charts. Both John and Paul have acknowledged that John wrote Please Please Me in its entirety.
Please Please Me? Please Please Me is my song, complete. Was my attempt at writing a Roy Orbison song, would you believe it? I wrote it in the other bedroom in my house at Menlove Avenue in Woolton, which was my auntie's place, the suburbs. I remember the day and the pink eider down on the bed, and I'd heard Roy Orbison doing Only the Lonely or something, and I was trying to please me. That's where that came from. And also, I was always intrigued by the words of Please lend your little ears to my please, Bing Crosby song. Mm-hmm. I was always intrigued by the double use of the word please. So it was a combination of Bing Crosby and Roy Orbison. Although the arrangement was made by all of us. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, the song did not sound like that when I wrote it. It was just a basic whatever on a guitar. You know?
The writing was actually completed between June 7th and June 9th, 1962, shortly after the Beatles returned from their first recording session at London's EMI Studios. Encouraged to impress producer George Martin, who didn't think the 3 original songs they recorded on June 6 were strong enough to be released as their first single, John set out right away to make a song that would be commercially successful, the ideal pop tune. The first rendition of the song was brought to EMI Studios on September 4th, 1962, for consideration for their first single. They played Please Please Me, but it was very slow and rather dreary, George Martin relates, adding, I told them that if they doubled the speed, it might be interesting. I told them what beginning and what ending to put on it. Paul remembers, we were a bit embarrassed that he had found a better tempo than we had.
I mean, when we turned up here to do Please Please Me, originally, John had written it, and it was like a Roy Orbison song. It was, come on, chin chin, come on, chin chin, please, please, yay, go Roy. And it was very slow, jum, 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 that stuff. There was a lot of people into that at that time. And George said, now, you know, perk it up, lads. Please, please. Oh, bloody hell. Can't do it that fast, George. You think we are, you know. But he was right, you know. So he made a lot of those kind of decisions for us, and that's a big help.
In any event, these suggestions were to be worked out and implemented by them another time, thereby disqualifying Please Please Me for the B-side at this point. Of course, since this was a rehearsal session only, no tapes were rolling, so, unfortunately, no recording exists of this day. Engineers Jeff Emmerich and Norman Smith were there to see this early rendition of Please Please Me being practiced. Emmerich remembers, the song being rehearsed was soulful and was sung with great feeling by John, but it had a very slow tempo and was marred by a clumsy phrase that George Harrison played over and over again, repetitive to the point of annoyance. Ringo was doing something odd, too. He was sitting behind his kit with a maraca in one hand and a tambourine in the other, all while hitting his bass drum pedal with his right foot. A ridiculous posture that caused Norman Smith to burst into laughter and shout out to us, "Look at what that bloody drummer is up to now!" In the Beatles anthology book, Ringo concurs, saying, "On my first visit in September, we just ran through some tracks for George Martin. We even did a Please Please Me. I remember that because while we were performing it, I was playing the bass drum with a maraca in one hand and a tambourine in the other." Naturally, George Martin also saw this performance, which likely strengthened his previous decision to have the Beatles use a session drummer. In the end, Martin decided to make Love Me Do the single's B-side, as we all know. The remaining practice songs, such as Please Please Me, were postponed for a potential future date. The Beatles then played the new, fast-paced version of the song, which included Martin's requested modifications, on September 11th. There was still another hour of time available to the Beatles, Emmerich continues. "Have you boys got something else you'd like to play for me?" Ron Richards asked over the intercom. "Yes," came the enthusiastic reply. Just then, George Martin walked in and got on the talkback to say hello to the band. He announced that he was going to have a quick listen to what they'd done and would then be right down to start work on the new song. Norman lifted a few faders, and we were able to hear what was going on downstairs. After the first run-through, there was a great deal of discussion, and it was clear that George Martin was dissatisfied. "Look, you've definitely got something there, boys. We need to sort out some harmony parts for Paul." They nodded enthusiastically and began experimenting along the lines that George had suggested. In the March 8, 1963 edition of NME, John commented, "What made it exciting was that we had almost abandoned it as the B-side of Love Me Do. Imagine that! A number that could get us to the top just tucked away. We changed our minds only because we were so tired the night we did Love Me Do. We'd been going over it a few times, and when we came to the question of the flip side of Love Me Do, we intended using Please Please Me. Our recording manager, George Martin, thought our arrangement was fussy, so we tried to make it simpler. We were getting very tired, though, and we just couldn't seem to get it right. We're conscientious about our work and we don't like to rush things." John and Paul's use of harmonies, reminiscent of Kathy's Clown by the Everly Brothers, was another novel aspect of this rendition that George Martin liked. "I did the trick of remaining on the high note while the melody cascaded down from it," Paul said. At any rate, one of these tired experiments with Please Please Me was captured on tape. The fact that an acetate disc of the recording was made shows that it was in fact being considered for the B-side of Love Me Do. This version of Please Please Me was included on Anthology 1. "We were standing in the corridor outside the control room after the session," Ron Richards remembers. "George Martin was saying, 'We haven't quite got Please Please Me right, but it's too good a song to just throw away. We'll leave it for another time.' Listening to the anthology version, you can see how close they really were to the finished one. The few missing ingredients could easily have been added in overdubs, which was a luxury that they would utilize very soon afterward. In the meantime, the Beatles took to heart the suggestions made to rework Please Please Me once again for a future recording session. John explains, "In the following weeks, we went over and over it again and again. We changed the tempo a little, we altered the words slightly, and we went over the idea of featuring the harmonica, just as we done on Love Me Do." George Martin called a group meeting on November 16th to discuss a possible strategy for a second single. Since their first single, Love Me Do, had only peaked at number 17 on the British charts, Martin realized that they had been forced to spend some of November and December abroad in Hamburg, Germany, while the record was starting to chart in the UK. This prevented them from using live performances to promote the song. However, despite the record's low chart performance, he decided to risk investing in a second single because he wanted to be able to get himself a Cliff Richard counterpart for his Parlophone label. George Martin remembers that, during this meeting, he revealed to the boys that he was still thinking that we should release their earlier recording of How Do You Do It for the A-side of their second single, still feeling strongly that it had hit potential. Ringo said, "I remember all of us being ready to stand up for the principle of, we have written these songs and we want to do them." Dick James, however, did not like the rendition of How Do You Do It that the Beatles recorded and had a vested interest in having someone else record the song. George Martin says, "I would still have issued How Do You Do It had they not persuaded me to listen to another version of Please Please Me." After it was determined that the September 11th recording session for Please Please Me was unsuitable, a new recording session was set out for November 26th to both record the B-side and rework the song. At that point, Please Please Me was completely finished in its official form. John says, "We tried to make it as simple as possible. Some of the stuff we've written in the past has been a bit way out, but we aimed this one straight at the hit parade." One 3-hour session was all that was thought to be needed, unlike the 2 3-hour sessions that were necessary for Love Me Do. George Martin finally agreed to let Ringo take his rightful place as the drummer. He also suggested that John play the harmonica for the song's main riff, instead of having George Harrison play it on guitar. However, unlike the process for Love Me Do, this time they decided to record the song live with John on guitar, and then overdub the harmonica later. Once they had captured a satisfactory take, though it's uncertain which one, the recording was transferred to another 2-track tape machine while John played the harmonica simultaneously. This resulted in the now iconic blend of George's guitar and Lennon's harmonica, creating the distinctive riff that became the hallmark of the song, making the harmonica a key feature on another Beatles single. By 9 p.m., after 2 hours of work, George Martin famously declared from the control room, "Boys, you've just made your first number one." His confidence in the band solidified from that moment on. He never again suggested that they record cover songs for their singles, a policy that remained throughout their career. Analyzing Please Please Me shows how the perfect pop song was crafted in the 60s. The track has all the essential elements: a catchy title, an instantly memorable opening riff, well-placed breaks that draw attention to the song's key moments, and a climactic ending that leaves a listener satisfied. The musical precision displayed here reflects the Beatles' evolution as a tight unit, honed through their years of performing in Hamburg and at the Cavern Club. Most importantly, even though Please Please Me was only their second single, it was the song that truly launched them into stardom. While it's tempting to speculate whether they would have struggled without the fortunate connections of people like Brian, Dick James, and George Martin, one thing is certain: none of it would have happened without an outstanding song. John's songwriting brilliance shone through, delivering clever lyrics and an engaging structure. The track's success also became a significant win for George Martin, whose arrangement ideas ultimately helped the song resonate with the public. After this, the Beatles' respect for Martin grew substantially, and they would continue to rely on his musical guidance, to varying degrees, throughout their career.